building a board. And I'm going to take it back on a more spiritual level. The people that we're surrounding ourselves with are so important because there are some people, and I do a lot of analysis on this between companies, their meter only allows them to get to a certain level. And as a result, they don't want to see a lot of other people around them be massively successful. And so part of what you're doing, and I wish founders did this more. When I started to get into venture capital, I said, okay, I need to draft off of the most successful people in the industry. Can I get access to them? And so I spent a lot of time like running after. There were 3 people and they're all investors in our fund. But I hustled because I knew that if I took their money, that I would get their advice. So, someone who, like most VCs start firms in their early or mid careers. I started my firm at my 40s when I'd spent 15 years running stuff. And so I'm starting at a very different place. So I have some benefits that others don't, but I also don't have, or didn't start with like a 50-year career outlook. I guess my point is, at the end of the day, who we surround ourselves with has a big impact on the breadth and the scale of what we're able to do. Number one. Number two, as you're thinking about that people that you're surrounding yourself with, you have to structure it. A company that is at the Series A or beyond stage legally has to have a board of some kind. It needs a set of fiduciaries who represent the asset classes of investors. And so at a Series A, you're probably going to have at least a board of 3 people representing different asset classes. So one is the founder, CEO, chief operator. The second is going to be the person who represents the common, which in most cases are employees, founders, people who are putting in, who are exchanging sweat for equity. That's the common stock, right? And then the preferred stock are the people who are exchanging money for equity. And their stock is worth more. In many cases, it's an order of magnitude, 10x. And that group needs a representative. And so in most cases, that's the venture capitalist. So on a board, you might have, in the early stages, a founder, someone who represents the common, which might be like a large angel investor, or a co-founder. And third, you would have someone who's on the preferred. And that tends to be the structure. In most cases, you can't really influence who is on that board. You're really determining who your investors are, and that affects who your board members are. But you can certainly control how that board operates and functions. As you get larger, boards go from 3 to 5 to 7 and scale out. In most worlds, you want a board to be odd numbered, so you never have a stalemate where you've got 2 and 2 or 4 and 4. You usually want to have the ability to have a tiebreaker in a decision in voting. So boards are fiduciaries who represent different classes of stock. You can also have board members who are independents, who just bring insight and perspective, and they earn a board seat. What I would say in the beginning, your board should be a group of people you could get around a table and eat a box of pizza. You can share a large pizza, and that's enough. Over time, you want to have a board that represents your different classes of stock because you're required to, but you also want to have people who have a market perspective, who are bringing a unique set of insights, or who bring relationships that you desperately need. So let's say you're a cybersecurity company and you're at your Series C. You just brought on $20 million. You've got your Series A investors. You've got, someone representing common. You've got yourself. You've got an independent. And you might have another seat, a 7th seat, which I think boards should be small and efficient. You might want to find someone who is a firebrand, who's different, who doesn't agree with and doesn't come from the space, because what you want to avoid is everyone getting groupthink. You want there to be some tension, and I think that's valuable in the process. The other people in the room, so you might have board members, but you might also have board observers who are coming from your venture investors, and these are people I know on my team, someone who is bringing a different perspective than me from my team, who's watching my 6 o'clock and who's like, well, I read the data and here's what I saw. So someone on my team who's bringing a different point of view. They're not voting, but they are an influencer. You also have your CFO and your executives. So boards are often inclusive of the executive team of the startup. And I will say that going, founder to CEO again, as your company evolves over time, the people who are speaking in the board also changes. And it becomes much more about, I know when I was a Series A CEO, it was mostly me. Series B, it was me and my head of sales and maybe my head of product. By the time we were at C&D, it was the CFO, the legal guy. So it really evolves because the way that the business evolves, it looks different over time. And so who you have in the room and who's influencing the conversation also evolves. Spend a lot more time later looking at financials, discussing risk and unit economics and metrics, whereas at the beginning it's about product and strategy and customers. It really moves over the lifetime of the business. I took over a company, a CEO, and we eventually did change over the board, but boards can have allegiances, and if you're being brought in as CEO, you want the allegiances to be around the business, not around the person who was running it before. I've seen people do this, especially if someone's brought in as CEO. It's important. Another mistake is not evolving the board, and you're having people on the board who are small check writers or people who don't have a lot of industry experience and knowledge, people who were your mentors or friends or co-founders. So the board has to evolve in order for the business to evolve, but it also has to evolve in reaction to the company's evolution and the market evolution. If you look at the board of like a lot of public companies, they're bringing in people who are professional board members because they are able to create a harmony within the room when you've got a lot of disparate people, when you have 11 board members. And so as the company goes public and scales and goes through different machinations, it's important to bring different levels of maturity because boards are then doing they have committees, the comp committee, the nomination and governance committee. And so you need people who understand not only the functions within the business, but the board has to also have functions because it's a public entity. And you need those people who understand the roles of the board by committee, right? So layers upon layers upon layers. So boards get professionalized over time, and those people don't come out of the business. They often come from industry or are recruited in. So what is the purpose of a board? Obviously, it's to vote on stuff and to, be advocates for different investors and different shareholder groups. Let's call it that way. But in reality, the way that it is ideally working is that we're all allies of that CEO in the business, and we're all lending our collective expertise. But the reason that it often doesn't work, it's such a simple thing. It's CEOs or founders spend so much time on the business, they forget about that board. And so what happens is it becomes a last minute thing. Oh my God, get all the financials together, get the story together. And then it becomes like this waste of 3 hours, right? And versus getting these people who their reputations depend on your success, getting them to come inside. And so I learned this the hard way. What happens in the boardroom should never be a surprise to anyone. It should be a somewhat choreographed strategy session with people who have been prepped for that eventuality. Boards can really shift based on the energy of the CEO, his or her involvement and direction. The thing about this founder to CEO transition that really breaks down, and I know I'm making this sound so easy, but when you're a Series B company, you might be spending 2 or 3 hours at most a week with your board. At the C and D stage, double, maybe triple that. Not because you're wasting time, but because these are the smartest people in the room and you actually need their guidance. And those meetings, so much more is covered. The more that you're prepping everyone for the meeting, the better the meeting goes. And so the biggest mistake isn't how you structure the board, it's how you interact with and prepare for the board. I have a 3-set principle when it comes to this. Always send the information well in advance. And you define well in advance based on how many boards your board members are on, not based on what you believe is well in advance. Well in advance could be 2 weeks, it could be 3. And that's hard because numbers are changing. You want to get the board everything in advance. Second, you want to identify wormholes, objections, concerns, things that light people up before the meeting. So I'm going to talk to the 3 most influential people in the room before we get there. Hey, I just sent you the deck. We hit our numbers. We exceeded them, but you brought up some concerns last time. What do you want to talk about in the meeting that's important so I can make sure that we get time for it? And you have to prepare that. You have to talk to them beforehand and be like, okay, I'm going to shift the agenda. So you're in real time trying to make sure that there's not a fight that breaks out that takes 2 hours of the meeting in a rabbit hole, but that everyone's being heard and that their concerns are being vetted, because if you don't do that, they'll talk to each other or it will disrupt the meeting. And then last, you're walking in that meeting with purpose. Like, okay, I want to hit these 2 points, but I know you guys want to discuss the third. And you're orchestrating. Part of what I learned is that as a CEO, your chair is best a little bit away from the table, because there's an observation that you want to be able to do to say, oh, wow, interesting. That person is not asking any question, is not engaging. Let me ask that, because your board members are the influencers of your business. They're the people who determine if you're going to keep your job. They're the people who determine where your next capital will come from. They're massively powerful, right, in relation to you and your business. And so you've got to observe them and be a student of them, as well as interacting and affecting your own desire. You've got to also know what's going on with them. And so as CEO, it's actually better that the data that you need is already to them, and the people who are presenting are the individuals on your team who own those areas of the business. So what does that mean? You're prepared, you're thoughtful, you have a team that you respect and trust, and that your board can respect and trust, and that you've spent the time getting everyone up to speed so that there are no surprises and there are no rabbit holes.